Welcome back. So how did the abortion weight limit come from and where does it go now? In June of 2015, Governor Rick Scott signed a bill mandating a 24-hour wait period for women seeking an abortion. The law was supposed to go into effect less than a month later, but was challenged in court by the ACLU of Florida and the Center for Reproductive Rights. A circuit judge ruled the law unconstitutional and it was put on hold. In February of 2016, the First District Court of Appeals overturned the decision, lifting an injunction. By April, the Florida Supreme Court issued its own injunction, and this month the High Court finally ruled the law is in fact unconstitutional. But what happens next? And joining us for more on the abortion weight law in Florida is Susan Nylon, a board member for the Florida ACLU, and Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club. So that is the question. What happens next? Is this litigation over?
No, it's just a preliminary injunction. The case itself will actually be fought in court, and they're working very heavily on it right now.
But it seemed in the Supreme Court's decision, they did talk about the merits of the case, specifically the majority writing that the mandatory delay law, the state impermissibly interferes with a woman's fundamental right to privacy. Yeah. Rod, the right to privacy in Florida, it's debated whether or not it's in fact in the U.S. Constitution, but Florida has it in its Constitution, and the majority that ruled here seems that it's pretty clear.
Right. You know, the legalities of it are one thing, and it seems to me that on this issue, if you go all the way back to Roe v. Wade, the legalities are totally mixed up and mushed together with the politics of it and with the morality of it and where you stand on it. So most of the time you find that these are able to withstand legal muster in conservative states and not in liberal states. And that tells me that it's more probably about politics than the actual letter of the law.
Right. And in fact, the minority writing here, and it was Justice Charles Kennedy, said that, Susan, that the court has no evidence that that a 24-hour waiting period is a significant restriction to the rights of an abortion. Frame the argument. Why is that a delay like that, especially when you're dealing with a matter of life and death, out of the ballpark?
So it's not just a 24-hour delay. It sounds like it's really simple. I know Rod has said it before. It sounds very reasonable to ask for 24 hours, but if you take a look at the process, it actually is way more than 24 hours. If you're actually talking about the procedure, there are two ways to have an abortion. One is through surgery, and one is through a pill. If you are at a position where you're going to opt for the pill, that already requires you to come back the next day to make sure that everything is okay. So adding that 24-hour period actually adds an additional day to that. When you're looking at women who have a very difficult time, you know, with financially, with their job, you're putting a lot of things at risk. Maybe they have kids at home for child care. That's an issue that they have to contend with. So that's 2 appointments and sometimes 3. And a lot of the concern is that if there's a choice and they have to choose between coming back that extra day, a 3rd day, then chances are they'll choose the surgery, things like that. Okay,
well, I mean, Rod, isn't that the point that opponents of abortion are hoping that a delay, whether it's 24 hours or 48 in terms of the pill, or adding time that could allow a woman to change her mind?
Absolutely, because we see it as saving the life of a child, saving the life of a human being, and that seems to take priority over the other issues that Susan has raised, even if they're legitimate issues. It seems to me that the priority there is the life of the child in the mother's womb, and I see no problem with the state saying, here's some more information that we're going to give you. Here's the information. You might not have all this. You might not understand all the implications on you and on what's happening to the baby in this abortion, in this process. We're going to give you this, give you 24 hours, or if it takes longer, to digest that information and come to a more informed decision about it for both you and the baby. That's only reasonable, I think.
Susan?
Yeah, well, it sounds like it is on the surface, the way he puts it, but I can tell you it's not. First of all, they get that information anyway. It's required by the state to have informed consent. Whether they sit there for an hour and talk to a counselor before they make their decision, or they come back 24 hours later, there's not a whole lot of relevance in the difference. Chances are, if they made the decision to go that far, they're not going to change their mind. What I do want to point out, though, is abortion rates in the last quarter century have dropped over 50%. without having all these legislative restrictions, why are we not focusing more on that? Why are we not looking at other ways instead of legislating it and keep doing whatever we're doing correctly?
We have only 30 seconds left, but I want to give you the last word here.
Right, so I think that's tremendous what she said, and that's roughly true. In my understanding, they've dropped a tremendous amount. That is fantastic. To me, that's continuing to be a hearts and minds winner for people who are pro-life, for those who are trying to explain what this
more
is.
People using birth control.
It could be that, but when you're talking about abortion rates, I don't, where our country is growing, I doubt it. I think what it is you're seeing a whole lot more people through the use of science understanding exactly what's going on.
Okay, we are just getting started, and when we return, we'll have an exclusive interview with the head of Florida's ACLU on tonight's topic. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing Florida's Supreme Court's ruling that a 24-hour wait period for abortion is unconstitutional. And our guests tonight are Susan Nylon, a board member for the ACLU of Florida, and Rod Thompson, the president of the Sarasota Republican Club. Rob, we're talking about the 24-hour wait period, but the discussion, in your opinion, always goes back to the central point.
Yes.
In terms of the right to abortion.
Right. It does, and I think that that's really why I get confused on even using the privacy provision in the Florida Constitution on this, because it seems to me that all the debates that we consistently have, whether it's the counseling, whether it's the wait period, whether it's any number of other things, are always orbiting around the central first principle, and that is abortion itself and what it is, and that is always dependent on whether that which is in the womb of a woman is a human being with inherent rights or not. If it is a human being in the womb of a woman with inherent rights, then it has got nothing to do with what we've been talking about in these ancillary issues. If we agreed on that, and it seems to me self-evident that it is, if we agreed on that, then we wouldn't deal with these other things. If we essentially agreed that it wasn't that, then I would be fine. There would be no discussion there either.
If it's not about privacy, are you suggesting to make it a crime? Are you suggesting to label it a murder or anything like that? I mean, what else do you, if you deal with it as legislatively and not about what it says in the Constitution, what are you suggesting? Sorry, I know it's your job, but
yeah, no.
I want to
what
hear
am I
it.
suggesting? What am I suggesting
Yeah,
regarding
what do you suggest
the
it be
privacy
labeled
issue?
as? No.
No.
As
Okay.
abortion, what would you label it as then?
I think it should be illegal. So if something is illegal, but you don't, in my opinion, you don't criminalize a woman who is in a difficult situation. Nobody doubts that. Nobody's saying that for most of them. But you do criminalize the people who are committing it.
Campaign.
But but he didn't know what he's talking about there.
Really?
You're talking about the president.
I know.
He never knows what he's talking about. But let's let it
disagree.
slide.
We digress for a second, because Rod, the High Court's decision here was a 4-2 decision.
Right.
So it seems to me that when this case goes through the process in terms of the merits, a 4-2 decision is unlikely to change.
It is unlikely to change. I agree with you there. However, that does not change in any way the moral view of the situation. I think they're deciding it based on the right to privacy applied to a medical situation. I think they should be deciding the right to privacy based on a human inherent rights to a human inherent rights situation. And in that case, it wouldn't apply.
Susan?
First of all, if it's a piece of legislation, it has to go through the muster of our Constitution. And since our Constitution doesn't call out abortion in any sort of way, we deal with it according to the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution says that we have the ability to be treated equally and fairly. There is no other medical procedure that is legislated by our legislature.
So, you're going up against somebody who's going to law school.
I understand that. But so if you say that, so that right to privacy and that protection from it, it seems to me that we do have another human being at stake here that has no say in it. We're not protecting that other human being. We're not applying that privacy. We're not applying any legal protections to that human.
It seems sometimes people on either side of the political aisle cling on to the letter of what the Constitution actually says at their convenience, and when it does not suit them, they're saying that the Constitution should not apply.
Or the Constitution should be changed, or it shouldn't. In this case, I don't think it should apply because we never get to the first principle for which all these are orbiting
you know
around.
why?
One second. Either the Constitution is a flexible document, or it is to be used in terms of the letter of the law.
No, you either amend it according to the constitutional way in which you're supposed to amend it, or you apply it appropriately. To me, it's not applied appropriately because there's nothing in that she read, there's nothing, or quoted, that there's nothing in there that she quoted verbatim that specifically says the right to privacy has anything to do with a medical procedure only. And I'm saying, therefore, it doesn't have to be replied to that.
No, it has to do with everything. Everything. It tells you, if you read the Constitution, it says we have a right to privacy without governmental intrusion. And this is a governmental intrusion. If you want to talk about morality, you talk about morality one-on-one. You talk about morality on the street, in the conversation at the dinner table. You don't talk about morality through legislating.
Of course we do. We
all you're
outlaw
going
murder,
to do,
we outlaw robbery, we outlaw thievery, we outlaw cheating on taxes,
yes,
we outlaw
and
going
I
over
asked you,
55 and a 55. We do that all the time. We set those laws in place all the time, and as a rule, they're reflecting a moral component. Even with environmental protections, they're often reflecting a moral component.
It's
we do it all the time.
Well, let me ask you this question, and tell me if I am digressing too much from what we're talking about here. But you're saying that if the Constitution these are morality issues that we have to set aside the exact wording of the Constitution.
No, I'm saying it's in the application, the legal application of the right to privacy, which is what they're ruling on. I don't think they're applying it rightly.
Because if you're going to expand the conversation to gun rights, there are people who say there are certain things about guns that are so dangerous that the Constitution
and we have waiting periods for guns. To purchase a gun, we have waiting periods. We have cooling off periods to purchase guns. I think this is a way more important issue, although that could be important too.
You know what?
And we have a waiting period for that.
But see, what Rod misses the point is that it's real easy to legislate something and then expect a woman to adhere to it because it's the law. And then then once they make that decision, first of all, it doesn't abolish abortion. In fact, chances are it's going to increase it. The more difficult you make of it, the more opportunity they're going to go outside of the protected way to have one.
I do not accept that.
Let me finish.
Finish, and then I want to get
But the point is, he should be more focused on making the choices better, making the opportunity for a woman who does want to have a child, carrying it to term, to make it a little easier, because over 70% of the women who have abortions are below the federal poverty line. They don't have any choices. And when they make that decision to have a child, to carry the pregnancy to term, what are they dealt with? No ability to have Medicaid, medical care, or so forth and so on. And they're called horrible things because we know single moms are the detriment to society, right?
Rod, what about Susan's point that if you outlawed abortion altogether, there would still be women who seek it just like they did before Roe versus Wade?
Absolutely. I am not a fan of the concept because something is hard to enforce or because not everybody will follow it, therefore we'll go ahead and make it legal. That makes no sense to me. You make the law based on the morals of our society and our culture that we accept to be morally right. And you don't decide it in a sort of made-up fictional constitutional right in '73. You decide it based on what I just explained. Now, to Susan's second point, I would certainly have some agreement there. I mean, actually, I think I'd have a lot of agreement there that we have allowed, and I'm going to go out on another moral limb here. We've allowed wide open promiscuity. We refuse to say that anything is wrong if it's related to sex. All we say is use protection. This is a recipe for just exactly what we've had with the teen pregnancy crisis and the high level
have gone down.
Right, because of information more recently. But if you look at the bell curve, it went up for a long, long time. And now more information on what can be done to stop it.
Also,
what
the
can be
more
done to protect
access to
it.
Abort control that they have also helps it.
I think that there was a time when it was there was a pledge to be abstinent to.
Yeah, that didn't work, actually. It failed.
And the study by who? This is why this whole thing is so politicized. So you immediately say that, and no matter what you would cite there, I would just about distrust it. A Harvard study. Right, I'm going to trust that.
I didn't say that.
No, but that's exactly what it sounds like.
There were teen pregnancies in the 1950s.
Of course there were.
In the 40s.
Of course there were. But what we see is it's much higher now. Look at the breakdown in families.
It's actually lower.
It actually is not. From then it's not. It's lower than it was where it peaked in the 90s or the late 80s is when it peaked. And it's been decreasing somewhat since then. But not a lot, but somewhat. I think you also have to look at the demographics that are going on in the baby boom and the baby boom and that sort of thing. And that actually does. No, that demographic does explain part of the reasons for it.
Educating our children and providing more opportunity to protect themselves is a good thing?
Sure.
Susan, let me ask you
I think we should also tell them what's right and wrong, though.
We do.
Let me ask you this more basic question. We still have a Supreme Court, which is the product of a time in Florida where there was more Democratic representation, Lawton Child appointees. That is changing now, as we speak. So decisions like this, which don't seem close on the judicial level, are increasingly going to become very close, just like they are at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, because again, we appoint, you know, when you appoint a justice because of their political beliefs and you stack the Supreme Court or any other level of the court, you're doing it to politicize the court. Now, that's not to say that just because you like the judge's political belief that they're actually going to adhere to it. If they're really true to their role, they'll adhere to the state constitution. However, unfortunately, right now we're up against the changing of our state constitution, so who knows?
Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about a story out of a Lakewood ranch in terms of alligators. Welcome back. There is no longer a waiting period for abortions in Florida. Is there a chance, is this a change that is a win for women, or could there be unintended consequences? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. So here's the question. If both of you at least agree that it is unlikely that the Florida Supreme Court is going to reverse itself, are we not talking about the 24-hour wait period anymore? And are both sides just going back to their arguments about abortion itself? Rod?
Yeah, probably going to have to. Well, I don't think we'll ever stop debating about the merits of abortion itself and whether it itself should be legal or illegal. And like the lady that Dwayne interviewed out there in front saying, you know, what other options can we provide for these? I'll say one thing that I get accused of sometimes, and it's rightly so to a degree, is that sometimes the pro-life Christian community has not always done enough to provide other options and adoption options. However, on the other side, I'll say, we're doing a lot more than we sometimes get credit for doing, and a lot more than we used to. I think that's helping the situation. I think churches and others ought to be, and secular organizations, though, that are pro-life, ought to be far more involved in that, and I think that will help the situation if a mom has another alternative to raising it herself.
But Susan, have we moved towards that direction in terms of the number of adoptions out there and the number of, whether it's religious or other organizations, secular organizations helping in terms of family planning?
I think what we've moved towards is to educate our children and adults much better, to make better choices. I think what we've moved towards is to allowing better access to birth control. You know, we always assume or go to the argument that it's a single woman or it's a young woman who puts herself in this position. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of women out there who are married, etc., who are also in that situation, who make those choices. So I think we need to keep going the way we're going and stop legislating it.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share with our viewers what some people are saying about the alligators in Lakewood Ranch. Dozens of them were removed last year, and many end up having to be killed for their aggressive behavior. Tonight, Florida's Fish and Wildlife is discussing whether more need to be removed, and here's what some of our viewers are saying. Amanda Firth writes, "That's ridiculous, Lakewood Ranch. You took their home and now want them removed. Why don't you remove yourselves?" Pamela Wade Blue writes, "They knew what they were getting into when they purchased the home. Learn to live with the wildlife or move. We shouldn't remove or kill wildlife to accommodate you." And Carol Jarvis writes, "The ponds were dug, then the alligators migrated towards them. They're dangerous. Why do people think animals are more important than humans? Weird. Sounds like a lot of jealousy." We could have gone on, Rod. We'll have more on the gators in Lakewood Ranch coming on tonight at 11 o'clock, but we want to hear from you. So let us know what you think about the end of the abortion wait period by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Susan Nylon is a board member for the ACLU of Florida. Rod Thompson is president of the Sarasota Republican Club.